Thanks for coming. I'm pleased to see so many people are here to hear about Hampshire's plans for processing annual reviews. And as Sarah said, this is a strategic overview of what we're going to do in terms of processing annual reviews, both historic reviews and reviews going forward. So there's a level of detail that I'll drill down into. Some of it does get a little bit complex in places. I've tried to keep it as straightforward as possible. What I think we'll do with that, because I know you'll have lots of questions about this, at various slides where it does get a little bit technical, I'll pause and I'll ask Sarah if there's any specific questions about something I've mentioned in that slide. It won't be an opportunity for a general question. It will be a question around, has there something in that slide or the previous slide that I need to try and clarify a bit further. So my name's Steve, and I'm an interim assistant SEN manager, and I've been around since September, and I'm here till the end of July. And my work now focuses solely on the annual review plans and the banding project as well. So that's the work that I'm currently involved in. But part of the work I've been doing over the last few months is looking at a number of processes in SEND and working with the management team there about any changes or tweaks that need to be made to look at our processes. So under my brief was the annual reviews. It was an area that has been identified as needing development. What I'll be able to talk about today for everybody is just a very, very brief high-level slide on the annual review process. This isn't a training session on annual reviews, and it's not a workshop on getting the best out of annual reviews or how annual reviews run. It's just clarifying what an annual review is. We'll talk about the plans to address some of the existing annual reviews and historic reviews. So where a review meeting has taken place and the local authority may be in possession of the report but hasn't yet processed that. So talk about how we're planning to increase the processing of those. And then what we do about reviews coming in. As you all know, reviews happen all the time, and there's a large number of plans, so it's a rolling program. So how do we create capacity within the SEN service to improve our timeliness against processing reviews? So I'll be able to talk about that and the how we're going to do that, how that's going to work in practice. There'll be a brief bits about amending when it comes to following review, amending an Ehcp. The focus of today isn't about amending Ehcps, it's a separate process. What I'm focusing mainly on is the processing of the actual annual review itself. But I do talk about amending to some extent. It's intrinsically linked, and it's quite often thought of as one big process. So we'll start to separate that out. Then what I'll get across is what this might mean for parents, and if there's any schools on board, what it might mean for schools as well. But talking about the plans and what it might mean and what you'll need to know and how you might be supported to contribute. So what I won't be able to do, as Sarah said, I can't answer any individual cases. I don't have any access to that casework, so I can't go into any details. So if there are questions, it's about what I've spoke about today. It's about the annual review, it's about the plans, and it's about the process. I won't be able to answer any questions on if you're waiting on a review or you're expecting an amendment. I won't be able to answer that for you, I'm afraid. And I also can't talk about anything outside of the annual review processes. You know, like a lot of authorities, there are wider areas for development in SEND, in HCC. Pick that up very clearly through the banding consultation, but I can't talk about any of those today. I need to focus this on annual reviews. So the annual review itself, just this is one slide, and we're not going to delve deep into the code of practice when it comes to annual reviews. But what we are going to do is just make sure that we're all secure on our high-level understanding of an annual review. So annual reviews must be reviewed at least annually or within 6 months if the young person's under 5. I think most of us will know that. And reviews are set out in law and in the code of practice. It's very clear what has to happen in the review process. And reviews, like a lot of things in SEND, reviews is one of those things that get slightly confused along the way about our understanding of what actually is the review and what the review constitutes. But the law's really clear on what happens in a review. And there's a very distinct what happens before in terms of invitations being sent out in advance and contributions to the review. And that's really clear. And then there's a meeting. And often people think the meeting is the annual review, but it's not. It's part of the review process. The review is concluded when the local authority makes its decision. So that meeting generates a report. That report must be made available within 2 weeks of the meeting. And then the local authority needs to make a decision following all of that process. So we need to decide what it is we do within 4 weeks of the meeting, which is a very tight turnaround, but that's what it's currently prescribed at. So there's a decision that has to be issued, and that concludes the review. And that decision, it has to be maintain the Ehcp in its current form, or amend the Ehcp, any part of the Ehcp, or cease the Ehcp. So a bit to clarify, because sometimes this gets a little bit lost in translation as well. Maintain doesn't mean keep an Ehcp. It means that it stays as it is, as it's written. It's maintained in its current form. Any changes is an amendment. So some of you may have spotted a letter that Hampshire used to use that slightly muddled that. So it wasn't entirely clear what the local authority's decision was. So as part of my work, that's been picked up. Those letters have all been amended. It's now really clear in our communication. It is either that the Ehcp has been amended and there are no changes, or it's been amended, or there's going to there'll be a cease. And we're not going to cover ceasing Ehcps at all today. So that concludes the review. That whole process is the review. It's not just the meeting. Separately, if the local authority decides following review it's necessary to amend an Ehcp, then the local authority has to start the process of amendment. You'll all know from the code that's without delay, okay? But there's a separate timeline and a separate standard operating procedure for amending an Ehcp. It's not part of the review. And quite often parents and schools will say, my review hasn't been finished. What they might mean is that we haven't issued a decision letter, so it hasn't been finished, the review hasn't been concluded. Or it may be that a decision letter has been issued, but there's still an amendment live that hasn't been finalized. But the two are separate. So it's important that we realize that there is a distinction between the two. So challenges for all local authorities, but particularly a really large local authority like Hampshire, is it's a very tight turnaround. So the school or the setting will have 2 weeks to submit that report and circulate that and issue it, which quite often, if it comes within 2 weeks, it might mean that a local authority has a very tight turnaround of 2 weeks then following that meeting to issue that decision. So that challenges all local authorities. But it's a challenge that I need to be aware of when I'm planning for how we handle annual reviews. Another challenge to a lot of local authorities, particularly Hampshire and the size, is an extremely large number of Ehcps to review. So however the local authority chooses to process its reviews and what standard operating procedures it uses, it's got to account for the fact that there's a large number of them. So planning ahead has to take that into account.
Steve, can I ask a quick question which relates to that slide, which is what happens if the school or college doesn't make that report within the 2 weeks?
So the local authority should be chasing. If they don't submit it, the local authority should chase. What I'll talk about is what the code says and what the law says on us. Often reality can be slightly different. We'll all know, particularly with a large amount of reviews going on, with over 10,000 plans that need to be reviewed every year. Local authorities, and I use the term globally, I say local authorities, on day 2 weeks plus one, it's not always the case that a local authority is going to be straight onto that setting for a review. If it hasn't been submitted, you would need to speak to the school, whoever held the review, and remind them that they need to submit that. And of course, let the caseworker and the locality team know to expect that.
Thank you.
Okay. So you may hear a term, if any of you work with any other local authorities, there's a term that's been used for a number of years now, and that's backlog. So many local authorities have or had, depending on how they've approached this, what's known as a big backlog of reviews. So over the years, reviews have come in, reports have been made available to the local authority, but the local authority hasn't processed that review yet. And by process, what I'm really clear on is in the previous slide, all of that is processing a review. and the review is concluded and considered processed once that decision has been issued. So many local authorities will have a backlog, and they'll have to have a plan to how to address that backlog as well. And the other big challenge for, and again I say for local authorities globally, is the national shortage of specialist provision. So if a young person is in a mainstream school and the recommendation is that a change of placement is required and the local authority should seek placement in a special school, is what local authorities are facing in terms of actually securing specialist provisions. Now, those of you that have been in SEND for a long time will know, 10 or 5 years ago, it quite often was the case with the local authority that maintained provision was full, and then you would have a conversation with the local authority looking to a different sector. So, the non-maintained sector, independent schools, essentially. The landscape today is a little bit different from that. A lot of the independent schools are also full and not offering places. So this really contributes to some of the challenges that local authorities will have with finalising an amendment following a review. So it's worthwhile keeping in mind that when you look at the entirety of it, whatever a local authority does has to count for all of those challenges and make sure that their process is compliant with the law as well. Okay, so part of what my role at Hampshire has been is to look at reviews and think, well, how are we going to address historical reviews, the backlog that I'm talking about? What's our plan to look at the reviews that have meetings taken place and the local authority hasn't processed it yet? But also, we can't just focus on the backlog. We have reviews coming in all the time. And again, with over 10,000 Ehcps, that's a lot of reviews to be taking place across the year. So we need to work towards having a system that fits within the wider SEN service and the wider SEN duties, as you'll know, assessing, drafting and issuing Ehcps, consulting, tribunals, mediations, reviewing, amendment. So that's an awful lot of work to do for any SEN service. So we need to create space and capacity within the service and within all of those processes to work towards a plan and a set of processes that improve our timeliness against annual reviews. So as was the plan when it was first initiated, the EHC Hub, which some of you may have used and some of you may not have used, is the tool by which Hampshire will be processing reviews increasingly going forward. And I'm going to show you later on just an introduction to what the hub looks like, because if you haven't seen the hub, it can be quite tricky to visualize how this might work. So I'll give you an introduction. It's not going to be a training session on the hub. That will come, but this is an introduction as to what the hub looks like. So the hub, when it was designed, and we're now on version 7 of the hub, was always designed to manage the process of review in various different ways. So in terms of sending invitations and collecting advice and contributions to the review process, the hub is designed to do that, to make that advice and those contributions visible to everybody. Any of you that have had any training in annual review legislation will know that there's certain requirements in terms of when invitations should be sent and the circulation of advice at least 2 weeks in advance. So that's something that's always been the law and will continue to be the way the hub works. But the hub was designed knowing that. So as one of the ways that information can be circulated in advance, the hub makes that advice and contributions visible in advance. So the hub was also set up to record the review meeting. By record, what I mean is any annual review, there's an annual review report. And that's based on a template that usually the local authority will provide to whoever's chairing the review and holding the review. And it's a paper report and it's completed and the sections are filled in, and that's what goes back to the local authority with the recommendations upon which decision to make. But the hub was always designed to either complement or work instead of that. So that was the intention of the hub. So the hub set up to do that. And then a report of the meeting can be produced digitally by the hub. So in the current process that most local authorities will have is that a review will be held, the school will produce the report, then they'll circulate the report. That's the report that goes to the local authority. But the hub can do that. It can record the meeting and the views, and it can be published on the hub already. So as you can imagine, that's advantageous to any local authority, particularly when there's that 4-week turnaround from the date of the meeting to issuing the decision, which, as I've said earlier, quite often isn't 4 weeks. By the time a local authority gets it, it's quite often 2 weeks or less for a local authority to do that. So any additional time that a local authority can see a report and make a decision is advantageous. So important thing to stress. I know the schools were slightly concerned about this, and I know parents will be as well. The hub doesn't replace meetings. So the meeting still happens as it always has done. The hub is the tool by which the meeting is recorded and the report is issued. So it's not going to be the case, as some people have feared, that it's all done remotely and digitally and there's no face-to-face conversations. That's not the intention. The hub isn't designed to do that. It facilitates that whole process. Okay, so this does get a little bit technical and complicated, and it's the easiest way really to explain how the hub can work, because it can work in more than one way. And when we talk about a big change like this to parents and schools, there's some anxiety. Well, what if we don't do it that way? Or what if the school isn't ready to do that? Or what if we haven't had training? But the hub works in more than one way, which I've put here as route A, which is our preferred route. This is where we aspire to get to, and this is where all the planning is heading towards, and route B. So essentially, route A means that a school or a setting can use the hub, as I've said in the previous slide, to hold the review, to chair the review, to seek the contributions, to record the conversation, and to issue the report. And once that setting hits submit, it's on the hub. So SEN, they can view it. As soon as it's there, it's almost instantaneous. Click, it's been submitted, it already exists on the hub. The alternative to that, which is route B, is that an annual review meeting can be held as it is now, and a report can be produced and it can be emailed to the local authority. And then within the SEN service, they can hold the review. So they can press all the buttons so that the information goes on. So it's two routes in. It's either that the setting is holding the review itself and it's there for SEN to make a decision, or it's that it's held outside of the hub. It's emailed into the SEN team, and the SEN team will hold the review. And by that, I mean press the right buttons and get the paperwork on. And then it sits on the hub ready to make a decision. So two routes, and two routes that can run in parallel. In terms of reports, if a school is not ready yet, and I'll talk about how we support schools in a few slides, if the school's not ready yet to hold the review route A the way we preferred it to do, they can hold the review the way they always have done, and they can simply upload the report to the hub, and it will be there for the SEN service to view as a digital upload. And that would be the same with any parental contributions or anyone else's contributions. It can all be uploaded, and I'll explain that in a few slides time. So then it takes us on to our decisions. The decisions can be issued via the hub. So the way the hub currently works with new assessments is when a draft or a final Ehcp is issued, then you press the button and it's published, it has been issued. So the hub can do that once the SEN service has had sight of the review report, whether it's come in via route A or route B. They can issue their decision once they've reviewed that and had that quality assured, and then that decision can be issued. So
can I pop in with a quick question there, Steve, just because it's relevant for this slide?
Yeah.
Are parents able to review the documentation being sent before they're submitted via route A?
Yeah, it's all on the hub. So the way an assessment, like a new assessment, is done at the moment, the information's there. So parent is able to see everything that's on the hub.
But when it's on the hub, has it been, I think the question is, when we have an annual review on paper, you see the paper before it's sent to county. I think the question probably means, when the button is hit submit, it's gone and county can see it and you can see it at the same time, but the parent doesn't see it before county. Does that make sense?
No, once it's published, once that's submitted, it's viewable, so it's all visible.
So in which case the parents don't review it before county sees it?
Well, no, what's already on the when I show you the slide in a couple of slides time, you'll see how it looks, but that's there on the hub. So yeah, it is viewable. I mean, it's worthwhile saying, because this comes up up a lot. There's no requirement that a parent agrees a report. Quite often there can be a delay in a local authority receiving a report following a review because a parent isn't happy about what's been said. But there's no requirement that a parent signs off that report before it's submitted to the local authority. You know, putting aside the wider issues and purpose of an annual review and looking at progress and the appropriateness of the Ehcp, remember that the primary function is to recommend to the local authority what decision they should make, and then for the local authority to make a decision. So that's submitted anyway. And if like a review now, if a parent wasn't happy with what was said at a review, or doesn't agree that what the local authority sees as a true reflection, that can all be added. There's parental views and contributions as part of that, and you know, objections can be held on file. But keep in mind that the function of the review is for the local authority to make a decision.
Great, thank you.
We will do lots of sessions on the hub, because it's going to be a new thing for a lot of people, particularly for schools withholding reviews as well, and for parents. So, you know, we have planned in how we support parents and new users of the hub to understand it. You'll see that if the decision is to amend, I've just put amend SOP, which is amend standard operating procedure, because we're focusing on the processing of the review, and the conclusion of the review is the issuing of a decision. If it's a decision to amend, that goes to the amendment standard operating procedure, and that process is a separate process. Okay. Does anyone have any more questions? Because I know that that's a reasonably complex slide, and it looks quite simple, but you know, essentially is it held in the review, or do we have to force it through the hub? But if there's a particular question around that.
No, that was the only question I had specifically about the hub, apart from lots of questions about, but what if I'm not on the hub yet? And are some people on the hub and not others? And when will reviews start being done on the hub? And I've been trying to get on the hub and I can't, but you know, I think.
Good, all good questions, and hopefully the slides will answer those. But if we haven't captured all of those, we'll capture them at the end. Just so everybody is clear as well, I'm not going to answer any technical questions about the hub. I'll explain a bit more about the way the hub works, but I won't be able to answer any technical questions on that.
Just got one coming about the slide. Is the standard operating procedure in the public domain?
It's not yet. The standard operating procedure, all of our standard operating procedures are being reviewed. So part of the other work that I've been doing with the SEN service generally is looking at all the standard operating procedures. So the assessment one is almost complete. We've completely redesigned our SOPs to make sure that all staff, including new staff, you know, an SEN service will always have new staff that may not necessarily be experienced in SEN and will require training. So we've revamped all of our SOPs so they make clear that everybody understands the legislation behind the decisions, the processes, and how they record that. In terms of the standard operating procedure being shared publicly, wouldn't be a decision for me. There is a new SEN service manager. It would be their decision if they were to be shared publicly. Theoretically, I have nothing against SOPs being shared. I think it's helpful to understand. However, what I would say is that they can be really complex and they may not make sense at all if you don't work within the SEN department, you know, of that particular local authority. A lot of it is linked to particular systems. If you don't know those systems, it might not make sense, but you know, it's not a decision for me.
Okay, another quick hub question, which I think is an easy one. Can you have two children on the same account on the hub?
Well, we'll get to that as well.
Okay.
Okay, I'm giving you, so just a quick, for anyone who's never seen the hub before, this isn't a tutorial. I'm not going to take you through how the hub works, but I'm going to show you what the hub looks like. So a lot of this will make sense and you can visualize what I'm talking about. So this Bucky, apart from being the Winter Soldier and a Marvel superhero, he's not a real person in Hampshire, so no need to panic there. But this is the annual review part of the hub, which is similar in how it looks to the assessment part of the hub. And as you can see, there's various panels and buttons that we go along as the process progresses. So as I was saying, it's already been set up that invitations can be issued via the hub. It's not the only way it can happen, but it can be arranged. Views can be contributed in advance, and this is what this page looks like. So this is Bucky's views, but actually, if we look down here, parents' views are very similar. So one of the things that schools consistently up and down the country don't always do is circulate information in advance. It can vary from school to school depending on a number of factors, but it's still a requirement. It's always been a requirement that invitations and contributions are circulated in advance. When I used to work in Sendias, we always used to say, you know, it's not a birthday, it shouldn't be a surprise. You shouldn't turn up to an annual review and be given information for the first time. You've got to have time to process it. So the hub was designed with that in mind. So the contributions are done in advance and they're clearly visible. So, you know, that information is shared. So this is and this is what the first page might look like, you know, and this is the view from the local authority, but the parents' view is very similar. So this one is contribute views, things that are important, you know, and the parent care reviews are similarly laid out. But that's essentially what it looks like. And as the review progresses, which can be done in real time, so if the SENCO or whoever's chairing the review wants to do it in real time on their laptop while they're there, it is designed to do that. If they want to do it on a paper format and then do it later, that's entirely up to them. But we're working through with schools what they think the best model for them is going to be. So you can see then that views are contributed. The next button would be meeting. So what actually happens in the meeting, what was discussed, what was recorded, progresses on to the next stage, which is the report, and then a decision, and then the plan comes after that. So it was always designed to do that. Here's just another example of the hub. So still with Bucky, this is what the report might look like. So the different areas that are discussed, they're all listed out. When it's finally submitted, the local authority and parent will have, they can go into each of those areas and they can look at what was discussed and what was recommended. There's a section down the bottom about recommendations. So what's the recommendation to the local authority? Should we keep that plan exactly as it is, or should we amend that plan or cease that plan? But it's, as I say, it's not a tutorial. So I just want people who haven't seen the hub to visualize what the hub looks like. The hub is a developing piece of software. So I said we're on version 7, and with each new upgrade and rollout, the provider works with local authorities. It was under my brief for a while, and I used to have fortnightly meetings with the provider, and we used to talk about what we want to see and what they call their roadmap, the functions that we think local authorities and parents and schools are going to need. So with each upgrade, things get a bit more stable and things get a bit more user-friendly. So what does this mean for reports? Because I've showed you what it looks like and I've explained the annual review process, but there's probably a lot of questions we've got about, well, what does this mean in practice and how does this work? I've just got to move you because I can't read my sentences because you're all on the screen next to me. So the hub is designed to capture the review meeting the same way as a report does. So it's not necessarily at the same. What I mean by that, so what we're looking to do is move away from things being done on paper and things being done digitally. So it doesn't replace a meeting. It changes the way in which a meeting is recorded and captured and reports are submitted. So meetings will take place as they've always done. You know, there's no replacement of an annual review meeting and discussion by using the hub. So the school can use the hub to record the meeting discussion and produce a report. That's the last slide that I showed you. Documents can be uploaded before the meeting. So any contributions, or if anything comes to light at the meeting itself, or if the school just isn't ready and able yet to use the hub for whatever reason, documents can be uploaded and they're all viewable by everybody that's on that case as well. And if it's the case that all we have as a local authority is a scanned and uploaded annual review report, as long as it's got all the information and it's used the right template, we're still able to make that decision. Okay. And as I said, once it's submitted, it's there, it's viewable. It doesn't rely on a 2-week process of someone sending that in. As once it's done, we have sight of it straight away. So decisions can be made when the schools submit the report and SEN have been able to make a decision. So if you can imagine, then that's advantageous to a local authority, because not only do we have more time to make a decision about that report, and we know we've got up to 4 weeks to do so, also the amount of processing time is greatly reduced for an annual review. There's a much wider piece of work going on with the DfE and looking at SEN in general and part of the SEND review. And one of the things that's acknowledged now really is SEN is extremely admin heavy. Every process is very, very admin heavy. And I was talking about this last week. What may look like a simple decision when you are waiting on the decision coming back may have several steps and several processes before that's able to happen. And it's a very admin heavy process. So as I always say, a good local authority understands legislation, it understands its processes, and it understands its systems. What does it use to make its processes work? And some of those systems, all of these processes can take a really long time. So anything local authorities can do to speed up those processes and cut down that admin time frees up capacity to work on some of the wider issues. So it's absolutely advantageous to a local authority to do that. Okay, when are we moving to this? And this, so I've got builders in at the moment, so if you can hear power tools, that's what's going on. So this does get a little bit technical and a little complex, and I'll do my best to simplify it. But if we have any questions, I'll try and answer them. So before this system can work, and this was part of the question a couple of slides ago, is Ehcp profiles need to be on the hub. Currently, about 12% of Ehcps in Hampshire were created on the hub. The rest were created before the hub or outside the hub. So there isn't a profile on the hub existing for that Ehcp. So we wouldn't then be able to process that review if that young person's Ehcp isn't on the hub. They don't have a profile. So this is what's part of a wider piece of work we're doing called our legacy program. And this has come hand in hand, and it's why we are where we are now in terms of timing. So for us to be in a position where all Ehcps are on the hub and reviews can be processed, we need those Ehcps and their profile to be on the hub, and that's a two-part job. So the legacy program means that the hub provider needs to create a space. Everyone has a profile on the hub. So the question was, can there be two young people as part of the process on the hub? If there is an Ehcp, there needs to be a profile for that young person with an Ehcp. So our annual review plan works side by side with our legacy program in order for us to do that. The second part of our legacy program is, once the provider has created the profile, there needs to be a manual task that needs to be done within SEN. We need to upload that young person's Ehcp and all the associated documents onto their profile. So it's a two-part. So the first part, legacy program, provider has uploaded, everyone has a profile. Then in order for us to process a review on the hub, we've got to do a manual part. We've got to upload that Ehcp. Okay. It's a big task. We've got lots of Ehcps, and we've already talked about some of the numbers for those. So in terms of how we do that, we run that side by side. So we load up to the hub as the review comes in for processing. So whether that's a historic review or that's a new review coming in, we combine that task. So we get the review, we're going to process the review, we're going to make that decision, and then at the same time, we're going to upload. And that's a one-time task. So over the next 18 to 24 months, as this process happens, as reviews coming in and we start to upload more and more plans onto the hub, it's a one-time task, and once it's done, it's disappeared. So what that means for us as a local authority, if this is our capacity, and lots of our capacity is spent uploading, once the upload's done, we freed up more capacity. And the more capacity we have, the more reviews that we can process.
Can I ask a quick question, Steve? Just thinking about technology and the challenges that not all families have access to the technology, will some of this stuff still be available on paper? Because I can just imagine trying to go through this stuff on a phone would be incredibly challenging. So will paper copies still be available for families?
Yeah, same as it is now with assessments. You know, we recognise not everybody has access to IT or IT that they'll be able to do this on easily. So,
or even affordable, because the credit, you know, to download big stuff, it's, you know, it's not cheap.
And there's much wider work. Some of you may have met Alistair. Alistair is the new assistant SEN manager who has development under his brief. So the hub and the development of the hub is now firmly with Alistair, but we work really closely on this, and we've had lots of discussions. We always had about how we capture families that will be challenged in using the hub. So there's various different ways as part of the wider hub development of how we do that. My last slide is going to be on support.
I think the other thing, which I think is just confusion, the hub doesn't mean that all annual reviews are going online rather than being face to face, does it? It's just the way that the data is captured. Yeah.
So the hub is our tool, and that's, you know, there's one of the key messages I really want people to take away is this does not replace face to face. This doesn't replace annual review meetings. All of that still happens. This is a different way of recording and processing. So it's a really key message to get. I know that's a big concern, so that's why I keep repeating that. So essentially that's what will happen. That's a combined task. So as the reviews are being processed, whether it's an older review or it's a new review coming in, then that one-time task of doing that upload happens, and then it doesn't happen again. But you know, we in the wider context of SEN and the SEN service, we need to make really efficient decisions about how we make the best use of our resources, and this is the best use of our resources. In the planning for this, there was an awful lot of number crunching that went on and an awful lot of planning. So this is by far and away the most efficient thing that we can do. The other thing that we really needed to be able to do is get the best out of the hub in terms of amending. The future is digitizing, and I say that both locally and nationally. More things will happen online. It doesn't mean they'll only happen online, but that will be the preferred route. And going back to that bit about annual reviews like SEN processes being very admin heavy, anything again we can do to reduce that admin is advantageous to everybody. So one thing the hub didn't do before this year was the functionality, our ability to do things in the hub wasn't great. We would have to take things out of the hub and put them back in. So let me give you an example. Let's say that we held an annual review and there was a review and we decided, yep, it's absolutely required that we amend this Ehcp. We're going to amend all of the sections of the Ehcp. We would have to, if that plan was in the hub, we'd have to extract that plan from the hub. We'd have to convert that into a Word document. We'd have to make our amendments, then we'd have to send it, and then we'd go through the process of amending, and then we'd have to put it all back in the hub. So it wasn't cutting down our admin time, it was actually adding to our admin time. So the latest version of the hub means we don't have to do that. Things can be done in the hub. If a decision to amend was a decision and we processed that decision, it came in, we said, right, okay, here we go. So our decision is amend. We're starting the process of amendment. The amendment notice is issued via the hub. When that draft amended Ehcp is ready to be shared, that's issued by the hub. It can all be done in the hub. There's changes that need to be made. It can all be done digitally. It doesn't need to be pulled out the hub. Again, taking the point.
Quickly raises another one then, Steve. So if something is uploaded new that a parent needs to view, do they have to just be monitoring the hub, or will they get some kind of notification that there's something they need to look at?
Yeah, so the hub does give notifications. If you're not a user of the hub, there's a whole process for how you're invited to the hub, how you log on the hub, how you register. It's very secure, and how notifications and the timeline, how it all works. We will, as part of the rollout of this, do specific sessions on the hub, and the last slide will talk about how we support that and how we look at individual sessions, but how we do things like this, how we have videos, instructional videos, and who you can ask for support, where you can get support. So, you know, that's the wider development work of the hub, but absolutely, if this is where we're moving to, we need to support parents and schools and other contributors to be able to use the hub. Okay. So both ways, if we go back to a couple of slides and I had Route A and Route B. So both of those are going to run in parallel for quite some time. Okay? We're not going to overnight be in a position where all of our schools will suddenly hold all of their reviews in the hub. We'll move towards that. It all relates back to our legacy plan. It's got to be in the hub in order for us to do that. But we're going to need to run both of those, Route A and Route B, in parallel for a period of time. It's not going to happen overnight. And looking at the numbers, we've estimated it's probably going to take at least 2 years to get us to a position where around 80% of schools will hold their reviews Route A, the way we want them to move to. So holding the review within the hub. It's a long process and it's not going to happen overnight. So we've estimated it will take about 2 years. We don't think realistically we'll ever get 100%. Lots of our young people attend schools out of borough that will may be reluctant to use the hub. Independent schools may be reluctant to use the hub. Working with schools in general to get them to change embedded practice and practice that works for them is a challenge in itself. Separately, as part of the wider hub development and the annual review development, we're holding sessions and working groups with schools specifically about this. What we want to do, and I'm really clear, is this is our plan, this is what we're moving to, it needs to be successful, it needs to be well understood, people need to know how to use the hub, but it's got to work for people as well. And if we impose a system that doesn't work on people, we're not going to have the success we need. What we need to do is we need to work with settings and make sure that they understand the hub and they value the hub and they understand the advantages of it. So, as a rough estimate, we're looking around 2 years to have 80% of schools holding our reviews the way we want them to in the hub. And then as part of the wider development plan, I won't be around for that. I'm only around to the end of July, but as part of the wider development plan, bring in early years and post-16 provisions and other provisions in. A question that is likely to come up, I would cover it anyway, is what if my child doesn't attend a school? Then it would be, if they're electively home educated, for example, then the local authority would have to hold the annual review. That's exactly the same as it is now. So, we recognise that not all young people attend schools. There's quite a variation of where our young people are placed and what they receive, but there's always a responsibility. And the code is really clear. If they attend a school, what the responsibilities are of the school in terms of convening and holding the review. And if they're not in a school, then who that responsibility falls to. But if they're electively home educated, the local authority will need to process the review and convene and chair it, the same way as any other review. Okay. So this is a really key bit, and this is what I think some of you are really keen to hear, is historic reviews. So we've got to have a system that works for both our reviews coming in and our historic reviews. What are we going to do about those? So we've split the plan and we've split the capacity when it comes to annual reviews. If they're new reviews, they're going to be processed in the hub alongside the legacy plan. But if they're a historic review, so if the question is, my son or daughter had a review 6 months ago and I haven't heard anything from the local authority, we've got a dedicated team that will be looking at that backlog, those historic reviews. So we've split it. So we are approaching both. Some local authorities, believe it or not, are not doing anything with their old reviews. I won't say which local authorities, but I've heard some real horror stories about not doing anything at all with reviews, but that's not what we're doing. We recognise there's a lot of parents out there that are anxious because they haven't heard about their son or daughter's reviews. So we have a team that are working backwards to a point and looking at the reviews historically, and a different part of the authority looking at the reviews coming in. So we have accounted for both of those. Either way, if it's processed on the hub, if the legacy work has happened, then the decision would be issued via the hub. The dedicated team will work through historic reviews to issue a decision. The most recent review received. So what I need to be really clear about is if we haven't, or any local authority hadn't issued a decision or concluded a review going back 2 or 3 years, we're going to process the most recent review. We need to be realistic about our capacity and our resource, and we need to be realistic about the impact of the review. If there was a review, and I'm going to pick a year, 2018, there was a review in 2018, and there was a review in 2021, then it's the 2021 review that's going to have the most up-to-date information, and that's going to be the ones that we're going to close off. Okay, so I know that there will be parents who might not have had a decision issued for longer than a year, 2 years, possibly more. I understand that, and I understand all the issues and the anxiety that goes around with that. But what we need to do is process what we can on the most recent information available to us. So we will process the most recent review available. If you've already received a decision to amend, so we have concluded the review, we've issued you a decision letter that says we're going to amend an Ehcp, you're not in review, the review has been concluded, but it may be the case then that you're still in the process of amendment. So the amendment, we've agreed that the plan needs to be amended, or it might need to be a change of score or any part of that Ehcp. You're in the process of amendment, so the review has been finalised. So that process will still happen. That's going to sit inside the locality team it's already with. But what we do need to do is we need to look at that, and we need to look at the number of reviews that we've got, number of amendments that we've got that fall into that category. So it's not a backlog review. It's not a review that we haven't processed. It is a review that we have processed. We've told you we're going to amend, but we haven't finalised that process yet, for whatever reason that may be. We need to do something about that as well. So as part of the wider work I've been doing, the standard operating procedure around amending is being updated and overhauled. So we have a lot of new staff. Like a lot of local authorities, there's a high turnover in SEN. So to make sure that we've captured existing staff and new staff, the amendment SOP is being updated and overhauled. I am doing that. There'll be further training across the SEN service as part of the wider SEN service training plan. There is an SEN service training plan. It's a continual development plan. It's something that development and training rolls with the SEN service. As I've said, there's a high turnover of staff in all local authority SEN teams, and we need to make sure that everybody working SEN has access to the right process and information. So I'm putting together the additional training so everybody is really clear on what happens in an amendment, what an amendment means, and what the timeline for amendments are. Okay, so that is how we're looking at amendments. So how will we support you to use the hub? So as part of that wider work we're doing, and recognizing that the hub's going to be new to a lot of people, we're putting together a package around that. So sessions, training sessions on using the hub, video sessions, links, anything we can do to enhance really the various ways in which parents and new users to the hub can get access and support. Alongside that is questions come up all the time about the hub functionality of the hub. And like any online system, it's not perfect. It does have gremlins from time to time. We currently have a series of hub champions within the SEN service. We've looked at this, and what I'm really clear about is everyone in SEN is a hub champion. It is our system. I talked about legislation, processes, and system, and the hub is our system. So everybody working in SEN needs to know everything about how the hub works. Alongside that, the CNDS have now been trained on how the hub works as well. I know quite often parents will contact CNDS for support, and they may not be as familiar with the hub. So a part of the work Alistair's done, there has been training for CNDS. We also need to support schools and settings. There's a program running through June and July where I'm running a series of awareness and training sessions for schools and annual reviews as part of that as well. So some of those wider issue questions about the hub and the functionality of the hub, we do recognise it's a new system for a lot of people, so there needs to be a package of support around that. Okay, that I hope should cover the hub and how the hub works and what we're doing to address historical reviews, amendments, and new reviews coming in. And that's the plan going forward. So keeping that in mind, and questions are about annual reviews and the processes and plan that I've just described. For the rest of the time, I'm happy to take some questions.
Okay, I've got all sorts of bits and pieces, Steve. First one, can you as parents say you don't want to use the hub?
The hub is the system that we are going to be using, and the information, your child's information will be on the hub. We, like all local authorities, we have systems. There are systems such as Capita or BSL liquid logic, all local authorities require systems to carry out their processes. If you've got an objection to using the hub specifically, you would need to take that up with your locality team, and it's not something that I would be able to answer now. But parents
could parents log that they'd like the stuff on paper rather than the hub, for example?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
So the hub currently has settings where it asks for preferences via email or post or digitally as well.
Okay. Can schools suspend an annual review?
Annual review meeting?
Well, it's not clear, is it? But can schools not do the review?
The code of practice is really clear in chapter 9, from 9.160 onwards, on what is expected and by who when it comes to annual reviews. So the expectations on schools are really clearly in there, none of which changes that the duty is on the local authority to review that plan within 12 months.
Okay, so it has to be done. Even if the meeting doesn't happen, that actual process of reviewing has to take place. Are there going to be templates and forms for health professionals to complete to feed into annual reviews? It makes it tricky for the SENCO to unpick their reports and select key things. Yeah, I could see how that makes sense. Is there going to be some kind of form to feed in information?
Yeah, there generally is for most processes in SEN some kind of template or report. I mentioned earlier about work groups. Part of Alistair's work is to look at specifically that. What works for people contributing, what works for schools, what works for professionals.
Are parents able to invite their experts to annual review meetings?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the local authority, it doesn't make any difference to the local authority. Our function and our decision making isn't affected by that. If a parent wants to take someone to an annual review of them, of course they are.
Yeah.
Do discuss this, however, with the setting and school. When professionals are coming on site, generally there has to be permission for them to come. So if you are intending to bring someone as an advocate or any other person for support, my advice is always to let the school know in advance and discuss that with them.
Can a parent upload their own updates to the hub if they don't agree with the report that the school has submitted?
Yes. So there's an upload function as part of parental contributions.
Okay. How much of a backlog is there currently with annual reviews, and what effect is this having on the time it takes to make a decision?
I don't know. I don't know what the current backlog is. It's not part of my plans.
Okay, I'll just see if we can. If after a plan has been reviewed and amended by a tribunal, must another review be held 2 months after the latter if provision ordered by the tribunal has not yet all been implemented? So it's about how often it's about the frequency of that review after a tribunal, isn't it? Does that change when the annual review is?
It's when this is in the code, so it will be within 12 months of the date of that plan or the previous review.
Okay, so it potentially changes your review schedule slightly, doesn't it? Because if you've okay, that makes sense.
I mean, this is more a question about tribunal, but what I would say is if the tribunal has ordered a plan and 2 months later you're intending to ask the school to hold a review, you need to be realistic about the local authority's decision. The tribunal's ordered it 2 months earlier. It's unlikely any local authority is going to agree it requires amending.
And then we've got, hang on, what's going on?
Sorry, can I just come in there?
Helen, I'm really sorry. We haven't.
But it's the wrong way round. It's the school that are ordering the annual review. It's not the parents. It's the school that are saying it must be done 2 months after.
Okay. Thank you. Does that change anything, Steve?
No.
Okay. I think, Helen, you need to direct them back to the code of practice and say that if the you have a year from that tribunal to do your next annual review, it's not the date. Is that right, Steve? It's not the date of the annual review previous to the tribunal.
A common misconception, and this is quite global as well, is that the review is concluded when the local authority has issued that decision, and that's within 12 months. So holding a meeting at 11 months and 30 days is not the time to be holding a review meeting. So think about the context of what the review is. It's not the meeting itself, it's the whole process that I've described. So what I would do in that specific situation is get advice specifically. CENDIAS would be the starting point, and enter into those conversations with the school as to why they feel that's appropriate. But, you know, different local authorities have different views on this. I've got a really clear view on it. You know, I'm not going to go into annual reviews or run a workshop, but there is the concept of the emergency or the early review. There's a review, you know, so it is a review of that EHCP. We know that schools and different settings, and sometimes parents will like to say, I want an emergency or an early review. The duty remains on the local authority to review that plan at least annually. That is the duty. So in terms of, you know, early and emergency reviews, it all depends on the presentation of the evidence at the time. What is the need to bring that review forward, and therefore would the local authority recognise that as being a formal review?
Just another one on timings. What happens if an annual review date falls during the summer holidays?
They need to move the review date. Remember, the review is the decision issued by the local authority. The school can have the review at any point in time before that with good evidence. If it be held at 10 months because there's a holiday coming up, then it's appropriate to do so.
Okay. What evidence does the local authority require in order to conduct a reassessment if it becomes apparent that the child needs specialist input during the review process?
I'm not going to answer that today. It's out of the scope of what I'm talking about, and it's too long an answer to give you in 0 minutes.
I think you're going to say the same about these. We've got historic EHCPs which have vague wording and provision in the wrong places, e.g. SALT in section G. Which part of the annual review process will these be corrected in? Will it be discussed in the annual review meeting or following the reissue of the draft?
If the plan is laid out incorrectly, or you feel the plan is laid out incorrectly, and it's appropriate to amend any part of that plan, as part of the annual review process, that should be the recommendation back to any local authority to do so. So if there's any wording that you don't believe to be appropriate, or by discussion or agreement at the review is required to be moved, then simply the recommendation coming back to local authority is that you should amend that EHCP.
One about the hub and things being uploaded on the hub. If HCC has, I guess, statements as well, but historic EHCPs from other locations, will they all get uploaded onto the hub?
Just clarify that for me.
So if your young person has moved county and therefore has historic paperwork from elsewhere, will Hampshire be uploading that onto the hub?
Yeah, the hub profile will have the relevant information to that EHCP. Remember, there is only one EHCP. You know, it's an amendment of a previous version, or it's a new EHCP. So that's the EHCP that a local authority and everybody works to. So the appropriate information will be uploaded.
What should parents do if we ask for an annual review and the local authority decline?
I can't answer that. I can't give any advice around things to do with reviews, but I would always say go back and speak to CENDIAS about your options.
And I've got another similar one where I'm just trying to collect together the bits of information so that it makes sense, about a year 11 phase transfer annual review that hasn't taken place. A meeting has been requested by the school and it hasn't been conducted by the SEN team. So what
it sounds a bit too individual for me to go.
But the onus to do the annual review is on whom? Is it ultimately?
The local authority have the duty to review that EHCP annually. If the is in a school, the school will have specific duties to convene and hold that annual review meeting, to prepare the report and to submit that report to the local authority.
So, okay, so from my understanding, if the school doesn't hold that meeting, does the local authority review without that data? Do they prod the school for that data?
You need to pick that up individually with the school. So if the issue was that the school haven't held the meeting, the first place is to address that with the school. There is a duty on you to convene and hold that meeting. And a local authority, being realistic, you know, within the context of the size of Hampshire, if they're made aware of it, then there's every possibility that that locality team should go back to the school and say, you are required to hold that review meeting, otherwise we can't process it. But there needs to be awareness on this. The local authority won't know everything. If you have flagged that to an individual case officer, my expectation would be that that case officer liaises back with the school and asks them to hold that review meeting.
Super. I've got several sort of about quality of EHCPs, and I know that's something that's being looked at in a separate thing. But can we just, are you able to talk to us a little bit about where needs are specified and provision doesn't match, or where provision is seen to be in the wrong part?
No, I'm only going to talk about the annual review plan and the slides that I've presented. I can't go into any wider issues. The reason I can is because I'm not working on those work streams. So it wouldn't be appropriate for me to comment on work streams that I'm not working on.
There is a work stream at the moment on it, isn't there, Steve? There's on EHCP quality.
There is, yeah, that's correct.
I've just seen something about the training, I think, for the hub, and asking whether schools will be invited to join us.
Oh, so
join it.
Yeah, separate program. We haven't released the dates yet, but there are 16 dates coming up that schools will be invited to seek some information, get some training on the hub and annual reviews. So the hub is always a rolling program. There always needs to be training and access to training on the hub for schools and parents. But as an intensive burst, we're planning dates before the end of this academic year.
And one which I think I've given the right answer to, but I'm going to check with you in case I got it wrong. If your child is in an out-of-county school, how will they be affected by using the hub?
So remember, we've got Route A and Route B, and we've recognised that we don't realistically expect 100% of all reviews to be held in the hub because of out-of-borough schools. But information can be received by the SEN service and uploaded into the hub. So our Route B, if we have a report, we can upload that, we can press the right buttons, we can make the decisions.
Okay, I have shared via the chat. Sendias are doing a workshop on annual reviews, which I think is much more the practicalities of an annual review, how to prepare for it, how to get your young person's views in an annual review. So much less strategic than we've done today, which is on Wednesday, the 26th of May. Which may be of interest to people here. I don't have the Zoom links yet because it hasn't been marketed, but it will be on our Facebook pages and so on in due course. I know it was only finalised completely yesterday, so I'm giving you early info. Okay, I think I've actually gone through all of my questions, Steve.
Excellent, good.
I'm just flicking through to check I've not missed anything. If anybody has got anything else, now is your opportunity, but I think we have covered most of those.
Sarah, it'd be really helpful to maybe produce some FAQs after this. You know,
definitely.
I recognise as well, as this all sinks in and people digest this, there may be a question an hour from now or tomorrow you might think of. So, Sarah, if HPCN are happy to collate the chat and any other questions, happy to put together an FAQ.
I think that's always helpful. I think it's always helpful as well sometimes to have something like that you can come back to after the case, because when you're watching something like this, I certainly know trying to follow the slides, follow the chat and everything else is can be quite challenging. So I think having some FAQs would be handy. I'll share the questions with you as well if everyone's happy for me to do that off chat so that you can see them. Super. Well, I hope that's been helpful. I know it's